I'll begin by reading the Territorial Acknowledegment. We acknowledge that the land in which our school and district buildings are situated is the traditional, unceded, and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin people. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples on the land on which we gather here today. So welcome everyone, and congrats, I think we're all here. Excellent, great. And I'll turn it over to our Vice Chair to chair the Committee of the Whole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. To open up Committee of the Whole, I require a mover and a seconder to approve. Just a second, we don't have to go into open session. No, just I require a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda for Committee of the Whole. Trustee Shields, seconded by Trustee Humphreys. All in favor of the agenda for today? That's carried. Thank you very much. The first item on the agenda on the Committee of the Whole is the introduction of the new supervisory officers, one which we kind of know and one which we kind of don't. But I'll turn it over to our director, Mr. Buffoni, to speak to this item. And also, you think you'll have one other person, right? That you're, yes. Okay, cool.
Great. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Just want to take this opportunity to welcome to our senior team, Jenny Smith and Kristin Ridell, our two new supervisory officers who come to us both internal and external, as David has mentioned. I wanted to share with the Board of Trustees, and this information will be shared with you. We're hoping by week's end, but at the latest by the end of next week. Just some roles and responsibilities. We've had some adjustment on the senior team, and you'll see that in a document that you see annually around our roles and responsibilities of Executive Council. But just so that you have some awareness for Jenny, she'll be, of course, Superintendent of Education for Program Services, looking after school effectiveness as our school effectiveness lead, including improvement planning processes at the school and system levels, assessment, evaluation, and reporting, kindergarten through to grade 6, programming, kindergarten to grade 6, MISA, which is a student achievement network in the region, school year calendar, special services, including special education, and healthy schools and positive mental health related to the well-being initiatives. There's other elements of well-being being that one of our other members of talented senior staff will look after. So welcome, Jenny. Great to have you with us.
Thank you.
And a welcome also to Kristin Ridell, who's joining us from Ottawa Carleton, also Superintendent of Education Program Services. Kristin will be looking after student success as our student success lead and all student success initiatives, including co-op, dual credits, OEAP, SHSM, school to college workplace initiative, and children and youth in care, as well as assessment, evaluation, and reporting grades 7 through to 12, programming grades 7 to 12, athletics at the secondary level, English as a second language and French as a second language, environmental education and sustainability, and international education. Neither of them will be very busy this year. So in essence, we've got our program elementary and secondary leads for the district, and then a really nice opportunity to also give a new opportunity for other members of the senior team, which again, I won't go through it all today. Really just wanted to introduce our new people. So welcome, Kristin, as well. And last but not least, I want to really extend my sincerest thanks to Hannah as our communications officer, who was flying solo for the better part of the spring as we re-coordinated with some changes, and want to welcome Raymond Coleman as our digital communication specialist to the district. Great to have him. Raymond will be here as part of our board meetings as well, along with Hannah, just doing that tremendous support work that always happens along our meetings. So thanks to both of you for everything you do for us, and Raymond, welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, thank you.
Just a very quick comment, just on behalf of all the Board of Trustees. Welcome, Jenny, Kristin, and Raymond. And I got tired just listening to the whole thing they're supposed to be doing. It's great. We are very pleased to have both of you, and we're very pleased to have Raymond. And Raymond, of course, I knew from a while back.
A while back.
Was he a good teacher or not?
We don't want to go there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. maybe more for Kristin than the other two. I know Jenny has a long history with our board, but I made a joke when I came in today that I'm around for another 4 years to harass administration. But you know, we have a reputation. I mean, Dave Shields has been a trustee for many, many years. We have a reputation here of we don't always agree on everything, but we get along. You know, we sort of respect each other, and I think there's a strong working relationship between trustees and administration. And I don't know what the environment was from where you came from, but hopefully you find our environment amicable and amiable, or whatever word works there. And it's good to have you here, and you as well, someone new. Okay. Any comments? Any comebacks?
Oh, that's good.
Trustee Shields.
Well, after their job description, I wondered what they're gonna do on Tuesday.
Thank you very much. All right. The next item on the agenda is the proposed plan for the alternative work environments, or hybrid work environments, I think, as some people call it. Quite a lengthy report in the agenda package. I mentioned to Susan, and I mentioned at the pre-meeting, that when reading it, I realized, and I'm sure we all agree, the amount of work from mostly probably from the director, but I'm sure there were a lot of people involved that went into this, because it's incredibly detailed. And I know we're going to have some questions once the director goes through the report. You know, thank you for the time you put in for this, because we know it's needed. So I'll turn it over to the director.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I want to start with a huge debt of gratitude to the senior team, principal and vice principal leads and senior managers, for their patience with me. In my entire career of the reports I've written, there were two that have been really uneasy for me. This is one of them. The other one was written in a different lifetime, in a different position, but and it's for a story for another day. This one was difficult for me because of the short, mid, and long-term implications of the kind of decisions we're making in this report. But again, I'm very grateful to senior staff and our senior leaders for all of their help in landing this. I think it's in a good place. We'll go through it. Forewarn the Board of Trustees, it'll be a bit of a lengthy intro, but I do want to set context for why we landed where we did, and very happy to field any questions. And a special thanks to Jacqueline Poirier and the HR team. I know they couldn't be here. Jacqueline couldn't be here this afternoon. Something unexpected has arisen for her. But special thanks to the HR team, who put together elements of the attachments, which have been very helpful. So, following report provides an overview of the proposed plan for alternate work environments as a one-year pilot project. So as an organization, we're going to delve into this, give our very best effort to see this through for a one-year period, and then reflect a year from now on where we're at with it. For employees of the district, as a large, complex institution of public education, the alternate work environments proposed for employees are really threefold. One's a fixed office space. The second is a satellite station. And the third is a place of residence. And so those are the three we're speaking about this afternoon, and we can help clarify some of that terminology along the way should you have any questions about that. But I did want to make that clear, that it was really three different scenarios in the environments we're talking about. In response to altered work arrangements necessitated by the pandemic period, considered really for the purposes of this report from the 13th of March 2020, I'll never forget being in here on that afternoon being told March break would be extended a week. And I thought, really? We'll be back sometime mid that next week. And really thinking about this now to the 30th of June, 2022 inclusive. Although we remain in a pandemic context for the purposes of this report, we've closed it off at the end of last school year to allow for this to take effect for the start of the current school year. It included ministerial orders that closed schools and central buildings for extended lengths. The notion of alternate work environments well beyond the pandemic context had been raised and has been raised by a number of stakeholders in the district. So the pandemic really accelerated our thinking around this, but in truth, it was a discussion prior to the pandemic period. And many organizations around the planet were already in very flexible work environments, as David had mentioned, hybrid sort of settings. So it's not the pandemic alone that spurred this report. The ability to work from an alternate locale moving forward has been contemplated by employees of the organization locally. pilot projects of coterminous school boards, including the Renfrew County Catholic School Board that was involved in a 4-board pilot regionally, the education sector provincially, and of course, society at large, nationally and internationally. In fact, well before the novel coronavirus emerged, as I mentioned, the idea of working from places and spaces other than a designated fixed office or workspace had arisen and were being carefully considered for a number of roles and responsibilities throughout our organization. Of importance to note, this is particularly pertinent for our district when taking into account the significant geographical considerations of Renfrew County. Various aspects of dynamic work arrangements emerged as part of the operational conversations during the previous multi-year strategic plan, 2017 to 2021, and included the potential amalgamation or procurement of sufficient office space and places for centrally assigned employees. And one of the issues that does remain both a challenge and an opportunity for us is that we have multiple central locations. It's got some advantages, it's got some disadvantages, but that was part of the thinking pre-pandemic period is, would we ever all be in one location or not as an organization? The Information and Communication Technologies Department, in particular, has referred to the nature of this kind of flexible work environment in its past 3 ICT plans. Influenced by forward-thinking literature of the time, the Economic Forum's Global Challenge Institute report, The Futures of Employment, Skills in the Workforce Strategy for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, as well as other documents pre-pandemic, really where elements of the organization have been attuned to research that speak to the evolving nature of work environments were really present for us as an organization. Coupled with the authentic experience of the pandemic period itself, including multiple transitions to and from working remotely, often on relatively short notice, it is clear that alternate work environments are plausible for the organization. Current research that supports this thinking include McKinsey & Company's Global Institute report on what's next for remote work, Statistics Canada's Working from Home in Canada, what have we learned so far, as well as People for Education's article, Provincially, A Perfect Storm of Stress, in March of 2022 that spoke to the advantages and disadvantages of hybrid learning and working models in our context across Ontario. The growing body of literature reveals consistently that the concept of alternate work environments is complicated and multifaceted with veritable challenges and opportunities. It's optimized application, and that's really important for me as director. I don't want to do this just to do it. For doing this, it's got to add value to the organization. Can't be something that we're doing that decreases value of the organization on balance, and that's why this is a 1-year pilot. Its optimized application throughout the organization depends on a number of factors, including but not limited to the nature of the work assigned to an employee, which makes good sense, the interplay between an employee's duties and those of another employee. So this isn't just about the self, it's about how the self interacts with others, as well as the intent versus impact on the organization's culture. Again, as I said at the outset, short, mid, and long term, where an employee's work environment varies significantly from those of another employee, perceived or real. We have to realize that we're in an organization where everyone will look at everyone else and what their conditions are. And there's an impact of that, even if it's only perceived. If it's not truly a difference, even if it's perceived, the advice I'm getting is that's a factor you have to take into account. You can't ignore it. For senior staff, both proactivity and systems thinking are required in order to lead effectively and efficiently in the school board context, including the large organizational size, our organizational complexity, and the diverse array of interactions with a multitude of stakeholders and structures. As described in the Ontario Leadership Framework, the ability to manage change on a large scale under complex circumstances, proactivity, and being able to understand the dense reciprocal connections among different elements of the organization while having the foresight to engage the organization in likely futures and consequences for action, systems thinking, are both applicable for the matter at hand. In effect, senior staff will most assuredly need to anticipate future demands that may require significant adaptation as an organization as a result of any decision or action taken in regards to the introduction of alternate work environments, including the consequences of no decision or no action taken whatsoever. If society is evolving and changing and creating alternate work environments and we don't, there's a consequence to be paid for that. including employees leaving this organization, even for similar jobs, to take a job somewhere else, simply for the fact of having greater flexibility of alternate work arrangements. So it's not as if we can stand still. We've got to move. We just have to move in the most sensible way we can. Considering the evolving nature of the matter in the sector and society, a key query for the district is, how might a proposed plan for alternate work environments add value to the organization? I regret to inform the Board of Trustees, that's just the introduction. With the above wondering of value add in mind, senior staff has reached out to a number of firms for legal advice, including Keele Cottrell, and of course, Nelligan Law, both locally and in a provincial context, for their advice. In brief, the interpretations of legal counsel received during the spring of 2022 included the following key points, and they were very valuable for the purposes of this report. First is confirmation that district school boards have generally moved back to in-person attendance for outward-facing staff at this time. So we're not coming out of the pandemic period where 67% of students are now learning online. We're coming out of the pandemic period provincially where the vast majority, well over 90 to 95% of students are back in person, and that has an impact on what we do in this report. Implications that the impact on individual industries or workplaces will differ in the move back to normal, depending upon the needs and purposes of the organization. Now, I quoted that directly from the feedback legally, but I did put the quote from some wise counsel from senior staff around the fact that it's with the recognition that workplaces continue to evolve over time. And so that definition normal may not be the normal that it once was. It may be a new normal in some capacity. Emphasis of a primary focus on the needs of the organization at both the macro and micro levels with respect to each job category, especially in the context of district school boards where there may be entire job categories for which working remotely may not be an option. And that we have to keep in mind as the leadership of the organization, that for some people, this just doesn't apply at all. And there's a perceived and real consequence to that we need to be cognizant of. Acknowledgement that contractual amendments may be required depending on the nature of the decisions made, especially for unionized group, and we're predominantly a unionized organization. Consideration of possible liabilities, including potential workplace safety and insurance, WSIB claims, privacy breaches, potential health and safety applications of the Ontario Health and Safety Act that we need to think about. And last but certainly not least, creation of additional supporting policies and procedures, such as requirements for the workspace in an alternate location, including infrastructural supports, privacy and confidentiality of the workspace, clearly defined expectations of work hours, deliverables, response time, as well as clearly defined consequences of a breach of any of the above, was the legal advice given. Of note, a number of pilot projects in place for coterminous districts over the past 2 school years have adapted their parameters for alternate work arrangements in order to ensure presence in person for the majority of the employees for the majority of the portion of the week. So a few of these pilot projects started by sending people home for 4 to 5 days. It was too thinned out. Those pilot projects, and they're not very old, they're only 2+ years old, pulled staff back to have the majority of their time together because there was not enough intersection between members of the organization. It's important to highlight that legal counsel re-emphasized the obligation to accommodate individual employees with specific needs if as warranted, which may include aspects of alternate work arrangements in particular circumstances that senior staff must take into consideration as management. Again, a direct quote. What it really means is there are some employees who are immunocompromised, for instance, who may always be immunocompromised, for which we need to accommodate an alternate work arrangement. So beyond what they advised, they said, you understand clearly there will be some employees, you need to do this no matter what, even if you didn't go in this direction. In addition, as context for organizational culture is of utmost importance, senior staff has taken into consideration following essential elements for alternate work environments. Moving forward in the effective and efficient operation of the organization. These are very important to me, these next 3. This is the crux for me of the move forward in this that we must adhere to. The first one is prioritization of decision-making processes in the service of our students. So whatever we do here, if it detracts from the service provided to our students, 1 year from now, we got to rethink that decision. The second one is exploration of potential alternate work environments for all employee groups, albeit on a very wide-ranging continuum. Also very important to me that it doesn't look like some members of the organization, especially if it's a very small percentage, get this wide-ranging flexibility and other large groups don't get any whatsoever. That won't hold. It won't even hold the year. It won't hold as soon as this is public. It will be questioned instantly, and we've got to be ready for that. Speak to that in one of our attachments. This last one is equally important, maybe the most important. Explicit dissociation of any and all evaluative aspects of an employee's performance tied solely to their alternate work environments. This report isn't based on trust. Trust is very important in the organization, but not this report. We trust all of our employees, and we cannot have a policy or a procedure that says all the good employees get to work from home and all the bad ones come to 1270 Pembroke Street West. So this report is dissociated from performance. If there is a performance issue with any employee, whether they're here in person or in an alternate location, we deal with the performance aspects. It's not tied to this. This isn't a reward for some employees and not for others. This is for all of the people of that employee group based on the supervisor's professional judgment as to whether or not there is some continuum of alternate that they can do. More specifically, the chart outlined in attachment A provides a summary of the number of employees by employee group, including the percentage of employees for whom contractual agreements or obligations may need to be considered, and opportunities for alternate work arrangements have already been provided to date. And I'll take you through that chart because I feel it's important the Board of Trustees has a sense of how many and who in each employee group and what that range is. To date, approximately half, just over 45%, have already been able, thanks to the efforts of the senior team and their staff, some form of an alternate work environment. And again, I'll go through that. One of the priorities of the senior staff is to ensure the earnest attempt at looking at this for every employee group so that we've at least considered it. All other requests beyond what's in the attachment will be considered on a case-by-case basis by Executive Council to look at the merits for the organization of anything beyond what's in the chart. So if you go to attachment A, there's two parts of the attachment. The first page is an overview of our entire, the first two pages, an overview of our entire organization. So all of our employee groups, there's 9 of them, plus the non-union group, which forms a 10th, make, and it rounds to 99.99%, but it's all of us who are in here, including the terms and conditions of our employment, 10-month or 12-month, part-time or full-time, how many are interim, as well as how many are long-term occasional, and the percentage of the staff that represents. On the right-hand side is the nature of the alternate work environment. So in those categories, and you'll see some of them are blank because we haven't worked it out yet. So if it's blank and it's not grayed, it means we haven't got to it and it's in progress. If it's grayed, it means it doesn't apply to that grouping beyond what's in this first chart, and I'll take you through that in a moment. But you can look across those groups up to a certain number of days per week, for instance, as well as in the case of elementary teachers, for instance, their 2 report card writing days, which could be done from an alternate work location or environment, not necessarily the school. And the key on that right-hand side is there are deliverables to those days. Whether you're regularly working from an alternate work location or it's 2 days out of the school year, there's a deliverable that must be obtained in that work from home. And again, we trust all of our employees who engage in this, that they'll be doing that. If there are issues to that, we'll take that up with our employees, but it won't be tied solely to the fact they were from an alternate location. We'll handle that in the general scope of their roles and responsibilities. The second part of this chart, you'll see.
Actually, just associated with that. So if that's good for the elementary teachers, why isn't that same paragraph put in with the secondary teachers?
Sure.
Do they not be able to do the same thing, or are they not expected to do the same thing?
So through you, Mr. Chair, it's a great question from Trustee Boland. At the elementary level in their contractual agreement, there are 2 of the professional activity days designated as report card writing days. The other days are designated as professional learning. So it was an opportunity for us, for that large group, to say which of those days could we have them working, or some flexibility from an alternate location. And those report card writing days is a really clear, crisp example of your deliverable is the report cards. Where you do it really doesn't matter to us as long as you have the approval of your supervisor. And so we were able to institute for our elementary teachers that. At the secondary level, they don't have the same contractual agreement. They don't have report card writing days per se, but we're looking at other opportunities to provide a day or 2 of equivalency to our secondary folks so that they also have some opportunity at this, knowing full well that the vast majority of their work days are in front of students in person. So second chart really breaks down for each of those 10 groups, the actual positions and how many people are in those positions. So the second part of the chart is our entire organization. Where it's grayed out, there isn't anything to add beyond that first page. So a good example is the elementary teachers. You'll see the vast majority of that section grayed out because they get their 2 days during report card writing, and that's it. There's no other differentiation. But if you look at other positions, a good example is our ICT department. You'll have a vast array of everything along the continuum. Some individuals who must be here looking after the network, and there's absolutely no opportunity for an alternate work arrangement. Another good example is the person you passed coming in. Janelle's our receptionist. We're a public-facing organization. We need her every day here. So her flex level is 0, all the way to an ICT specialist for cybersecurity who might be able to work from Toronto. So it goes from 0 to 100 with everything in between, but they are grouped into something we think is reasonable enough that we can move forward and have given consideration. You'll see a number of white areas. Those are areas, again, that aren't gray because it's not a determined yet. We're working our way through it. And there's a few that we still are sorting through with the particular manager or supervisor of the group. So just important that you have a sense that everyone's represented on that, including the entirety of senior staff. With the above in mind, and that is the practical reality that takes into account most responsibilities.
So just with the, I guess, the principals and vice principals. So I can understand to a point, like if you're in the school and you're responsible for the school, but there are some system principals and stuff like that that would be in an office. So why wouldn't they be allowed, for whatever reason, say they have a sick child, it's like, hey, can I just spend a day at home so that I can do my work? I just have to look after Johnny or whatever.
Couple of pieces, Trustee Boland. One is we didn't want this report to become a driver of decision-making unintentionally, where individual and system would aspire to a central position because of greater flexibility than their colleagues solely for that purpose. We kept our principals and vice principals all in the same realm. The other piece there is those system principals who are in a central role. One of the key elements of their jobs is to be present with teams on site in schools, doing the kind of support work that's required. So we didn't want to separate that out. And I guess the third part there, and we'll come to it when we get to the admin procedure, we got to make sure that this isn't viewed as a way to compensate for childcare or elder care. When you're working in an alternate work environment, you're present, you're available, you're focused in on your task. I understand the nature of the question, but we tried to keep that group all together, and that's why their days are solely, our principals and vice principals don't work 194, they work 204. We gave them flex in those 10 days where we thought we can give them a deliverable like scheduling or timetabling. And senior team, please jump in here if there are better examples, where they could take a couple in July and one in August where they could be doing work, say, from home that is tied to their work, but isn't a day during the year when they have kids. And all of this is predicated on not requiring placement, right? So your flex can't mean that we have to bring in somebody behind you.
And I think it's a good point. I'm not sure exactly where Leo was going with it, but it's not like they would be planned days. Like, I don't think this is to take away from a sick day. If someone wants to stay home to take care of their child and they're sick, they still have the option to take a sick day. I don't think it's to plan your work day around your sick children or that type of thing. It's you still have your obligation and priority is your job, right? So, I mean, there's going to be issues. We talked about this earlier, where I'll give you the example at Cisco, where the manager is doing an online, they're working from home and their dog jumps up on their lap, or the doorbell rings and it's pure late. Like, those things are going to happen, but you can't really plan your day around, you know, a sick child that day. It really has to be formatted through management. You have to get approval, that type of thing. I think you were thinking they could just choose when they wanted to stay home.
First thing that popped into
Yeah.
my mind, right?
I don't think that's the intention.
That's not the intent.
That would not be, to me, that would not be would be hard to manage that, I think. Anyway, okay, sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all. Please do jump in. I know I appreciate the board of trustees. It is a bit of a lengthy piece, but I did want to give some context to open the discussion, but jump in with questions along the way by all means. Senior staff further tasked the facilities department to establish a series of multipurpose meeting sites, 3 satellite stations in total, with 1 designated in each family of schools, as an additional alternate location for work beyond an employee's place of residence. The design shared in attachment B provide a series of preliminary layouts created by Hoban and Associates that outline details of the proposed satellite stations, including collaborative workspaces and private meeting places for each site, likely to be Arnprior, Opeongo, and Barry's Bay, our most outreaching areas of the district, so that there's an additional option for staff to minimize, and this might be one of the elements of value add, some of the transportation and the distance that we deal with day in and day out. The creation of the satellite stations allow for cooperative workspaces and meeting places for all staff, provided employees have the approval of their supervisors. So this fits a lot more, and I think this is part of, Leo, some of your question around some essential staff, where they might be more attuned to use these places than the everyday teacher who's got their classroom in front of them. Examples that may adequately be served by these satellite stations include mentoring sessions for new and experienced teachers, such as NTIP meetings, lesson study preparation and consolidation amongst teachers and early childhood educators, for instance, along with instructional coaches that are working in a classroom and then debriefing from that at a given site, and professional development related to health and safety for custodial staff, such as women's training. Those are all just a few examples. Of note, a booking system will be established for each satellite station, with prioritization given to staff based upon their roles and responsibilities. And the options shared above, along with others brought forward by stakeholders, will be considered and will evolve the nature of those stations over time. So you can see in attachment B some of the equipment that will support those places. There'll also be, you can see on the right-hand side, private sections of those rooms so that a private conversation could happen between a superintendent and a parent, for instance, if they happen to be at that site. It's just one more option so that it's not a binary at your workplace or at your place of residence. There's this other option, which we think will serve the organization well, and to be honest with you, is already in place in many, many cases. Alternately, that guiding or refining of the work is going to be reflected in attachment C, which is an admin procedure that we're creating around alternate work environments. And that admin procedure really outlines the parameters for these alternate work environments, including everything from the equipment and supplies, health and safety considerations if you're at an alternate location, travel and other expenses, including mileage, as well as confidentiality and security, because we understand as an organization, if you're in an alternate environment, you may not have the privacy that you would normally have at your designated fixed workspace. Excuse me. It is essential to add that the collective efforts to shape the pilot project for alternate work environments may be impacted by labor relations, as well as the possible continuation of the global pandemic well into the new school year. So it's our intention coming out of today's meeting that we set up to begin this for the upcoming school year, but we'll need to monitor it over time, not only as part of a one-year pilot, but as part of the other external factors happening on the planet these past few years. So you'll see the 3 attachments. And again, thanks to through you, Mr. Chair, for the lengthy description, but felt it was important that we set the context for that. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'm sure there'll be a few. Start out with Trustee Boland.
So just with the Empire, Opeongo, Barry's Bay, just when I was looking at the map and me personally driving around and stuff like that, and just when we do deployments of like the ambulances and where they're strategically placed. So for me, I would have gone with Pembroke, Renfrew, maybe, Eganville, Barry's Bay. I can see Barry's Bay. So that way, for the most part, anybody within the county has maybe a half-hour drive, to those sites. And it's in the center, so the people on the outskirts can go in, as compared to like our Empire, which is way at the other end. And then the other thing would be, it's for Margie, I know how long she takes to get to Opeongo. It's about hour and 10 minutes or so to get there. Whereas if it was Pembroke, even if you're like just north of Deep River to come in, you're still about a half hour, right? So if you had those 3 sites, your drive time would be roughly about a half hour if you're on the outskirts of those. And then they're the bigger centers anyway. So if you did need, people in those areas, you would accommodate more people quickly by those sites. That's just my thought.
No, it's a valid point, Trustee Boland. In fact, we had started sort of waffling between whether we had one in every family school, 7 areas. We pulled back a bit to get the pilot up and running. And when we thought about Pembroke, because it's a really interesting point, we had that conversation, we thought, well, we've got enough meeting space and opportunities within our existing buildings, including Mary Street and here, that it's almost happening already. And the Renfrew Arm-Prior combination, it was more amenable in Arm-Prior than Renfrew, but we did have that conversation. The Barry's Bay seemed like an obvious fit for reasons, and we also did consider, the Deep River area and whether we would have something there. So this could, after the 1-year pilot, sort of could expand into other sites depending on how it's going and what the feedback is we're getting. So I think it's a very valid point, because we did have a conversation about whether we'd ultimately have 7 of these over time, and started with 3 and thought, okay, we'll get this going. How does this work? Is it being utilized? That's the other piece of this report, is we're going to track the frequency of the use of alternate work days up to what we've permitted as a management team, and then build on it. So it's a very valid point.
Dave Shields and then Nick.
Listen, I wonder about public perception and how tightly, we will have rules in place. If I go to the mall, am I going to see all of our employees at the mall during the afternoon? And if I take a holiday in Jamaica and I find people are down there working, that's their alternate workspace in the winter. Is there the rules around, certain things aren't.
So Trustee Shields, this report sort of had me reflecting a lot, and I didn't even think about Jamaica. I think I would have passed out if I had a thought of our employees working from Jamaica during a work day in that way. But I think 2-part. One is part of what's written in the admin procedure is the ability for supervisors to pull people into the office at any point in time. So your place of residence has got to be within reasonable location in the event you're needed in person. And the other one is this never exceeds the 50% mark, so that there isn't a point in time where Brian and I are both called in, but now we're sharing a place. Everyone's got their fixed spot, and everyone connects at some point during the week, because nobody ever exceeds the 50% mark. Nobody ever exceeds the 40% mark. Having said all of that, there is a part here that I have had to, and I thank again the senior staff for helping me move along in my own thinking to get past some of the superficial public perception, which society is also helping us along with. In many organizations, people have different roles and responsibilities. Not everybody fits to the exact same work schedule or work environment. And I have many colleagues and friends who really don't know their other employee colleagues, never met them, but have worked with them for years, so to speak. So some of this will be the shift in the public perception. And the other piece is this report's not about trust. The decision-making is not based on trust, but we are going to trust our employees to be working when they're in their alternate work environment. We're going to supervise that in a very sensible and respectful way, not in a micromanagerial way. And undoubtedly, as is happening in many organizations, we're going to work through the complexities and some of the problems that emerge from this kind of alternate environment beyond what is the fixed workplace. And I'm very hopeful that the value add will outweigh the challenges that undoubtedly will.
I think it's relevant to Dave's question, but an example would be, in our company, the term place of residence was used as we are using that term here. Well, to some, place of residence meant their houseboat on the lake when they were in the summer. And so this became an issue with HR because I think I can share this. I went to HR and said, well, my second place of residence is in Florida. Why can't I work from Florida? And so they didn't have an answer for it. So your question is good. I don't think they know. The only thing they came back with was, we might be concerned about your safety being in Florida. That was all they could come back with. I never went, but
They were sunburned.
it's a great, what is your place of residence? Is it, if someone spends that particular time at their cottage, well, then that's their place of residence at the time. So it's an interesting scenario. And I don't think we have the answer to it. And I don't think a lot of people do yet, but it's a great question. So I got Nick and then Marjorie, sorry.
I'm just a little bit confused. Maybe I just misunderstood something, but when I'm looking at the principals, that employee group, they're all grayed out. So that means that they can't have any time off during the school year.
So sorry, I should have explained that to Trustee Edge. What's grayed out there is the fact that there's no additional detail beyond what's on that first page. So for all the principals and sites principals, they get up to 3 days, 2 days in July and 1 in August. There's no additional delineation to Leo's point earlier of, well, could a system principal have a different context than it? So it's been grayed there. What they have is what's on that first chart. But in other employee groups, it's beyond what the general one is. It's also broken down more fully based on the role.
Okay. And then,
It's a bit confusing.
and same with like elementary teachers and secondary teachers, they can have secondary, we're not sure yet, but elementary can have their 2 report card days.
Yeah.
The only issue I see arising is they're supporting our students, but so are, in all due respect to all academic superintendents and the director, you guys are also supporting our students. So should you guys not be working from site every day? If we're expecting our principals to do that during the school year, obviously during the summer, it's a different story, but it comes down to optics. And maybe not at the board office per se, but at one of the sites that was suggested in Armpar, Pembroke, or today.
Appreciate that, your point, Trustee Edge. I think one of the difficulties I had with this whole report is the fact that it also involves senior staff. And I understand that it could be perceived that I'm making decisions here that benefit me and me only, regardless of other members of the organization. I think I struggled with it for so long because I understood I have to break through that perception and I have to explain myself to the public. And I can assure you, you'll find me here on almost every day. But there may be times where even for me, I understand that working from Armpire based on a meeting I had in the morning or a flight that afternoon to Toronto makes better sense than working here at 1270 Pembroke Street West. I didn't want to disadvantage those people who had moved beyond that employee group. And of course, we're in that non-union group. I understand we're all educators and educators at heart too. I understand what you're saying. People are going to watch and look at what I'm doing and the rest of the senior team for that matter with a sharp eye on that front. So part of what took us so long to get this going and to put this on the table, and I kid you not, this is a report about 2 years in the making, was sorting through how we address that, why I think that up to 1 day a week for the senior team was reasonable. some of the other central folk that are not directly site-based or system level. Some of them are getting up to 2 days a week, but of course, our senior team for one other day a week spends it with me every Monday at Executive Council, and then one of every 2 weeks they spend with all of us here. So we did look at that, did come to landing there. And I think on balance, Nick, it's fair and respectful of the work done by the senior team, the nature of their roles, which are not specifically site-based, but you're quite right. The vast majority of their work, I can assure you, and mine, will be in support of our students, as said at the outset. But that's where this gets differentiated. There's no question.
Okay, thank you.
I have Marjorie and Susan, and then back to Dave.
Director, you have given me a headache as a former administrator. I'm very concerned about the role of middle and senior managers and administrators in our board. Who is going to do, there's a vast number of categories of employees in our board, all of them with different requirements. Who is going to be doing all the monitoring, the supervision, and the accounting of it? Will we need a second superintendent of human resources? My second concern, that this big one, this is a huge one, especially as you introduce it, it's more complicated and everybody's arguing about it and so on. The second one is, how many more grievances are we going to be getting about, well, I saw that he was doing this and she was doing that and I'm not allowed to do this. We may have a whole string of grievances coming in the years that this is implemented. Again, all overburdening every human resource person.
So to answer the two parts of your question, the first one is that as part of the development of the administrative procedure, we're tasking the Human Resource Department with coming up with a couple of attachments. One is a bit of standards of work outside of your office space, ergonomically, health and safety wise, a checklist that employees would follow on that front. The second one there is that the Human Resource Department will be creating a template that everybody will follow to be able to collect over this one-year pilot who worked in an alternate location, when, and how long. We've set limits up to what it can be, and there's that greater differentiate in the second part of attachment A. But that will be monitored over the course of this one-year pilot to determine, has this added value? Have we seen other unintended consequences that we now need to rethink? To be able to reflect after the year in our best attempt on this work. I can share with the Board of Trustees that many districts have headed in this direction. Many districts are providing, and this is more attuned to centrally assigned staff than it is school-based. I acknowledge that openly, have provided this kind of opportunity to their employees and are monitoring it over time. With respect to your second part in terms of grievances, again, I can't stress enough, this report isn't built on an evaluative system. People won't get to work from home just if they're really solid employees and have earned the right, or people on probation don't get it till everyone in the employee group gets the opportunity at it based on that gradation that the managers and supervisors have felt. If there are issues with terms and conditions, with the roles and responsibilities, we've got to address that, whether it's in the designated space that they have here, for instance, or at their place of residence. It's not inconceivable we may get some of that, but my hope, and I've spoken proactively with our Federation Union leaders about this, called them in advance. One of them said, wow, that's going to be a very challenging report. And how are you going to manage that, and it's our attempt here to try to get everyone on the organization somewhere on the continuum. Understanding that they will know if they took on the job as a classroom teacher, the vast majority of their time will be in front of students. But if you're a payroll clerk, you've got more flexibility in this. So we don't anticipate a whole number of grievances that are, well, why her and not me, and why him and I didn't get it. We're laying that out here. We're trying it for a year. We've already been through every single position in our organization up to what they can get. And then we're going to evaluate after a year how this is played out. So we haven't left anyone unconsidered. Now, it is the case for some of our groups, like our secondary teachers, we haven't worked out the when and where, but there's an earnest attempt there. And I've had the conversation with Kristin to find a reasonable 2 days to match the elementary one to see it through for that group too.
Sure.
follow-up, please?
Sure.
Yeah, my concern was not evaluated in that in terms of grievances, but rather that the monitoring could easily go astray. If you consider the average school, there's all kinds of people at different levels and so on with different requirements, how many days and so on. And keeping it monitored and correctly without mistakes, that would cause the grievances. So I'm hoping that whatever computer program comes up with, somebody is still going to have the task of maintaining that and filling it all in every day. And I think we were talking earlier about the load on our superintendents. School administrators, we know, have the same thing, and also senior secretarial staff in the schools.
No question, this makes our environment in this context a little more complicated, but we'll get that template straightened out. And the key part there, to your point around, monitoring, is what's the deliverable? What is it you're completing when you're in an alternate location? Are you getting that done? Have we got issues with that?
Yeah.
That standard template also allows us for the HR department, because what you're talking about, Marjorie, is going to land on HR. Eventually.
Second superintendent.
Yeah, that we're going to try to have a standard template so that they can roll it up, for lack of a better word, into system level analysis of what's happened here. And has this been really beneficial for certain areas over others? All to be determined, but I think it's valid points you're raising as well.
Thank you.
And maybe monitoring needs to be defined differently, because I don't think we're going to be monitoring people like daily, like with the GPS on their computer. It's just, so it's, and I know with our company going through this, there are some jobs that, you whether you're at your desk in your office or you're at home, you have to do certain things through the day for a certain time, because that's just the way it works. You have a 4 o'clock deadline for certain things, and issues have to be looked after. There are other positions in the company where they don't have that. So they could be anywhere and not doing anything. They don't, and that's the dilemma our company has, is how do you monitor those people versus a totally different group that, like my group, we have a certain routine, a certain process to follow every day, that someone can read a report or look at a transmission and decide whether you're actually doing anything, or if no orders go out, then they know you weren't doing your job. But there are other positions where you can't monitor that. And that's the dilemma that our company faces. So I think we need to define, if I hear Marjorie, what's the definition of monitor, right? Is that
Meaning more counting than the actual, what are they doing?
oh, like the numbers? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, yeah, because I have a point on that management side after, yeah.
Agrees, and they
Yeah.
right.
Part
And
of what we're doing
the
with it.
workers are not going to understand that. I'm sorry, Pina.
No, not at all. Through you, Mr. Chair, part of what we're doing in response to Trustee Adams' question is to create an online template that everyone fills in that's got the standard ability, so you can pull the cells
Right.
into a system level, break it out by department.
Intensive.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's what the HR department's working on. And my other point there, I just want to reiterate again, I don't want to create an alternate work environment that sends people to alternate locations only to feel we don't trust them.
Mm.
Right? You've got to be careful for the organizational culture that we don't do this, but actually what's really being demonstrated to staff is we're going to check how many keystrokes you've done and how many. I'll be frank with all of you, my computer's on all the time, and sometimes I'm immersed in an article or a report that even though my computer's on, I'm not actually working on that. So we've got to keep that in check. We trust our employees. They're all good people doing good work. And we're gonna base this on that. So again, it's not trust oriented. We'll do the monitoring and the accounting or the sort of the trend analysis, but this really is based on professionals doing the good work they've always done in 3 different locations.
And I think the vast majority, I'll go far as 80%, but the 80-20 rule is they will. I think they'll look at this as a real opportunity to be flexible. So anyway, Susan, and then back to Dave Shields.
I have 2 questions, but one kind of follows up with Trustee Adams, so I'll go with that one first. We talk about really 3 different work locations, and tremendous amount of work's gone into this report, so it kind of blows me away too. So I guess the question is, would you foresee, for example, an employee on Sunday night deciding they're going to work in 2 different locations that week? Would the expectation be that they would indicate to their supervisor, for example, that they're going to be an prior Monday at their regular work location, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then somewhere else Friday. Is that sort of what you're thinking? Or is it more formalized where, no, you're going to be there like 2 days a week and that's it? Or how does that work? And it kind of follows up with Marjorie's monitoring piece, I think.
I appreciate Trustee Embry's where you're going with that. I think in response, this isn't going to be ideal, but it depends. Depends on the role, depends on the individual. The idea would be that employees would work out with their direct supervisor, manager, principal or superintendent, whatever it might be, that flow of a work schedule, in part because the interconnectedness of the members of that department or portfolio has got to be there. So it can't be, and I've explained this and had that conversation with our senior staff and our managers, it can't be that Friday looks abandoned here.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've got a problem. We don't have the coverage that we need. So this is a very thoughtful rotation, for lack of a better word, for up to that day to 2 days of the entire team. And it's up to that manager or supervisor in that position of added responsibility to sort that out. Who's there, when and where, so that Friday looks like Tuesday, looks like Monday. But the other part of what you described is very possible. I have a meeting with a teacher in, Barry's Bay on Monday morning. I'm working the afternoon there, rather than that lost travel time only to get back to Pembroke and then the short curtailed day kind of thing. So a little bit of both, but on balance, the idea and part of the way we track, for lack of a better word, is that week or 2 weeks cycle and schedule.
Okay, so that would make sense. You have to have some flexibility, but also some continuity as well. And my other question, if
Sure.
I may, Dave, this is very complex, very complicated. How will you evaluate it at the end of the year so that you can really justify either moving forward or not? And I also tie into that, how do we define value added? Like how I can't really get my head around what the value added will be, except perhaps for morale of staff, which of course is important. But how do you define that?
So through you, Mr. Chair, it's a very excellent question. And to be honest, we haven't formulated all of that quite yet. Partly because it took us so long to land on this with the varied perspectives. People have a collective perspective and they have an individual one, which sometimes aligns and sometimes differ. I struggled with a lot of what you're describing because it implicates me as well in possible opportunities for me. Although, as I said, most time you'll find me here or in schools. What we'll do is look at the administrative procedure and look at all those parameters for the alternate work environments and create a bit of a continuum of, poor to fair to adequate to great to excellent on those parameters and look at what comes in the rolled up systemic evaluation of how many people actually did what we permitted them to do. You don't have to do any of this. Everybody's got a designated spot. If you don't want to do any of this, you come to work. And we have employees who said, actually, I've got 4 kids. I'll see you at 1270 Pembroke Street West because that's where I can focus in. So a lot of people won't.
Mm-hmm.
And even with permission, we'll look at that and create a bit of a rubric. And the idea would be in the spring or summer of next year to bring forward back to the Board of Trustees, because I know it's an operational matter, but it touches on all of us. It's a huge decision-making piece where we landed and value in judging value to the best of our ability. A great example might be, it sounds superficial, but a reduction in the amount of mileage that we spend as an organization for our employees. One example. Now, that's not the first one I think of. I think of the impact on our students, but there are a series of things by which we can look at where we were and where we are now over a year, and nothing precludes extending the pilot if we're unsure or retracting it altogether. I think everyone understands that, or enhancing it in some areas and not in others, but we'll try to create that rubric of assessment based on those parameters.
Just 2 quick comments,
Sure.
if I may. Thank you for helping with that. And I'm assuming, and I'm sure you are reaching out to other districts and boards to say, what are you guys doing? Can we cooperate? Can we share how you're doing this so that we can all learn together? And then a second one, I think you're right. We have to remember and not lose track of the fact that not everybody's going to do this. You know, we can get so worried about it that in fact, it may be 5% of the organization. We don't know. So I think we have to keep that realistic number in mind as well, that it may not be as big as we think. We don't know.
A great example, Trustee Humphries, what you're talking about, the elementary teachers and doing report cards from home in essence, you know, started well before the pandemic. It was something that federations came forward and said, you know, my members are driving in only to get on their computer, not collaborate with any of their colleagues. It's different if you're meeting with your, to next point, you know, your EC partner or something like that, where you're collecting information to write the book. That's different, but to just do the report. So it's a good example of this already having evolved to a certain extent. And the value add on that one, for instance, is, are the teachers getting the report cards done? If we're getting a whole bunch of report cards in late or missing timelines, now we're rethinking it. But if teachers are sending in their report cards based on the timelines the principal's established, that's we've crossed a hurdle there that we can live with.
Thanks.
Trustee Shields and then Trustee Ginnett.
Yeah, I was concerned, like Marjorie, about this becoming an HR nightmare. And I wondered about how you would handle overtime, for example, from home and that sort of thing. But you mentioned a couple of consulting firms. Did they have experience, I guess, with other companies doing this? And could they sort of point you in a certain direction? Avoid this, avoid that. And then to follow up what Susan said, are you going to bring them back at the end of the year to help, look through this and see what worked and what didn't?
Really interesting, Trustee Shields, what you're sharing. Tracy Lyle said, their organization, although they're a law firm that specializes in the education sector, they don't specialize in this. Keele Cottrell, that we've worked in other capacities, has been doing it. And Nicholas Simmons of Keele Cottrell said, it's just about all that I'm doing right now is this, figuring these short and long-term parameters out for organizations in education and beyond, because it's so complicated, as was mentioned. And of course, the fallout of some of it isn't quite there yet. The HR nightmare we're looking to avoid is that lack of judgment based on if you're a good employee, you get to do it. If you're not, that will create the grievances that I think Marjorie's talking about. We're separating that out. We're saying everyone in an employee group gets this range of whatever it is that the managers have deemed to be acceptable, or all together, like the principals, vice principals, you all get this, or the elementary teachers, and allowing the rest of the organization to flow like it normally does. Issues with employees, we take it up, we involve HR, consult with them, all those other processes take place. So my hope, Dave, much to the response to Marjorie, that it doesn't skyrocket the number of issues. If it does in the one-year pilot, quadruple the number of issues for HR, we're rethinking it through a different lens a year from now.
Trustee Ginnett.
Yeah, I know that, Pino, you alluded, thank you. You alluded that other boards have tried this, and you alluded that some of the boards had their employees working at another site or at home more so than you've proposed or your senior team proposed. I mean, that's been a bar that they probably overextended and went, whoa. And I think that it was wise of you to do what you've done. In other words, let's make, I don't know if the right word is baby steps, but let's move in the direction, but let's not overdo it and end up like in the last year or two with some previous boards. So as I see it, just generally speaking, although it's a very complex thing and there's a lot of, dust that's going to settle at the end of the year trying to analyze this, is that from the way I see it, ZAP with senior people up to 1 day per week for the entire school year. I look at that as a baby step, as being very reasonable in optics and perception, providing it's given to the broader employees in a way that sort of they can swallow it along with their unions. That's how I look at it. So, I just sat back and listened to the whole discussion, but I see it as it's not a leap, it's a step. And, you analyze the step after, and it's a pilot project. And you alluded to, if we need to extend a pilot project for another year, we're coming up with analysis, but we haven't had the full analysis yet. So be it. So just my thoughts at the end of the run here. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Trustee. Just to add a point to what you've shared, in defense of our employees, This context will be different from the pandemic one. I know the pandemic one, people were at home, but they were at home with their kids. They were often at home in isolated conditions. This is not the same. This is, you're choosing to come forward to your manager supervisor to take part in the option the organization has put forward around alternate work environments, knowing that your kids are going to be in school, or whatever your context is. It's different than the pandemic alone. And that's important because our employees did do yeoman's work. They did incredible work for us during the pandemic period, but this isn't a pandemic. This is irrespective in a way of the pandemic. It's just a different way of working.
And Mike, to your point, well, I guess I'll phrase it that, the company I work for has been in this for a year. First of all, the pilot part is critical, right? They haven't figured it out. They're the largest food service corporation in the world. They haven't figured it out. So, and the progress of it is interesting when you see people who are working at home, and then the demands that they have to continue working at home. And I mean, I feel like I have a little bit of background because I watch what our company does, and it's, again, they don't know. So this is a pilot project. It's a step process, like you said, and there's all kinds of factors. Now, the only thing I don't think came up is, so I had a question earlier about like the management side of things. So one of my concerns is like, I know that I can't mention the name of the organization in the county, but they have a huge issue with this work at home thing because their managers all work from home. And so there's no one in the office to direct people when they're there. And so it creates this vacuum. And, one manager is actually on vacation, but the manager covering for them is at home and not available. And so they have a combination that nobody can open for drugs, and everyone just sits there. And so to me, like, that's where it, from the top down, it has to be, and again, it can't be an HR nightmare or monitoring nightmare, but boy, it's got to be managed properly so that there's still that, I believe anyway, there still should be that hierarchy that allows things to flow, and maybe using Pino's term, provide the value added. But I mean, it's, as I said earlier, I would have thought we'd be back to normal. There's no normal. This is the new normal. This is the standard now. It's just, I don't think anyone's figured it out yet. And will there be grievances, Marjorie? Oh yeah, of course. You should see some of our senior management meetings where the employees get to ask questions of senior management. It's all about, they want huge monitors and they want ergonomic stuff and they want the company to provide it. And the company fights back by saying, well, we'll decide later, And so the company's going to say, we're going to make this an option. So it's your choice. Therefore, we're not going to supply you with this. Like, it's this battle. And again, I think the biggest point is that it's a pilot and we're going to grow into it. And it's the way of the future, whether we like it or not, and have to figure out a way that makes it work to the advantage of the overall board and the students at the end of the day. So a lot of work, man.
Pieces, Vice Chair, Advisor, just add to that, sorry to interrupt, but we will also be monitoring other elements over time, absenteeism, vacation days, claims of various sorts. So the point around, we've set up an AP that permits certain things, but one of the things we're going to have to take a careful look at is if we don't permit something, and then 60 months later, we've got a medical claim that is 10 times the cost of what would have been the provision that was requested. That's part of, I think, what David's saying, that we're going to have to, as society, look at over time, because the investment front end in certain things that may seem counterintuitive are not required. If they have other consequences down the road, we just got to have an eye to that. And to be honest with you, we have enough partnership organizations that will be bringing that to our attention, like our absentee rates, our WHB claim. All of those pieces will also feed not only a one-year pilot, but what I would say is the move forward in the future.
Steve Boland.
Well, I think, if we were to actually look at this, like before the pandemic, it'd be a harder sell. I think the pandemic has shown that, it just made it easier for upper management, senior management not only here, but across the, all senior management to show that, yes, we can have staff working from home or somewhere else, right? Because we had no choice and everybody stepped up to the plate, and your 80-20 rule kind of thing usually falls, right? It worked out well. And then that also paves way then for just a general public. Some of those are working from home or they're aware, but it's been put out there. So it makes it an easier sell then, to them as well.
And someone mentioned earlier, I think it was Dave, about, are you going to see teachers at the mall? So I'll give you an example, personal opinion, is that, teachers, when they're doing their report cards, they're allocated that day at home. They could choose to do their report cards from 6 a.m. till noon and then go golfing in the afternoon or go to a hockey game. Like, and that's the, like, to me, that's the advantage of being able to do that. But they have that specific, like, if they don't get the report cards in and someone sees them at the golf course, then that's the issue. Am I correct on that? Like that, we have to expect that because that's going to happen, right?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and I think it's a good point you raised. And just as a point of clarification, and we worked this out with some of our union groups, to protect our employees and to protect ourselves as an organization, one of the pieces of the admin procedure that's very important is established work hours.
Okay.
And I think I'm not discrediting that can happen, but in our case, in our organization, for the benefit of, again, protecting them, and the Federation doesn't want to see their members put in a bad light either. We've established work hours that reflect what would be the work hours in that designated workspace, just to make sure we're not getting, quite frankly, even a teacher saying, well, gee, I'll just take that report card day, head out for the long weekend. I'm off in Toronto and I'll do the report Sunday when I come. There's an expectation that they're adhering to the work hours to keep that contained. But that will also be something over time that we just need to keep monitoring, make sure we're on track to allow for that so that we don't have anyone inadvertently, us as an organization, putting them at risk or they themselves putting their professionals.
It's interesting. Okay. Any other questions? Anybody? Well, thank you all very much. It's an interesting.
But there's no recommendation.
There's no recommendation. I should have mentioned that
As an operator.
right off the bat. Sorry, Susan, there's no recommendation.
That's good.
The next item on the agenda is also, we're turning it back to the Director of Education. It's the vision exercise on the secondary school consultations. And there was a good report in the agenda package there today as well. Again, no recommendations, just turn it over for the report.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Again, Board of Trustees, this will be a shorter, tighter report for you. Update on the progress of our secondary phase of the vision exercise regarding programs and services offered by the district at the secondary level. I just wanted to follow up in this report. Really, this was deferred, ironically, from that same March 13th date that we met in this room planning out elements of these site-based consultations. And then the pandemic hit us and we've not had a chance to get back to it. So very briefly, last year at this time, 24th of August, 2021, we had an update on the work of the secondary school review. It has been a bit of a solemn course for us because of the pandemic. We've had fits and starts of this secondary work that we had planned to complete a couple of years ago, actually. 5 key areas, comprehensive reports, the most recent one on the 24th of May around student success. Since the start of the vision exercise during the 2019-2020 school year, a number of reports, of course, have been provided and some elements postponed. You'll note in the current status for the fall of this year, in attachment A, a series of consultations. It's ironic, they all have to be confirmed. But the point here of this attachment is that we'll have 8 in total. We'll combine our adult and continuing education staff. The idea is that there'll be full day sessions with staff coming in half-day chunks to the greatest extent possible so that we can trade off staff, have some coordinated occasional teachers, and then spend some time at lunch together with them, just enjoying conversation about this important topic. Each consultation session will be co-facilitated by myself and the chair of the board. Chair Morris and I will start the discussion off and then quickly move out of the way to allow the important work to take place, led by the superintendent of education responsible for the family of schools and the area trustee. So there'll be representation from a governance and operations perspective, as well as members of of central staff that might oversee those particular themes or areas. We added a sixth theme, which was an other category. Is there anything we didn't cover here that you feel as a member of staff from your site's really important, you want to comment on it? So we've got a bit of a catch-all for another area. And we'll select alternate dates and times for each site so that in the event we've had to shift, we've got the other one as a backup. I will share with the Board of Trustees these to be confirmed. You know, ideally, we're going to run these sessions between the two Thanksgivings, Canadian and American Thanksgiving. But in the event, we're looking at labor challenges along the way, and it's more advantageous to front end them to get these done. We'll shift the dates and work with you. I hate to say, but Shelley will be responsible for coordinating all of these with all of you, which I think is going to be a miracle to land these 8 dates with this many stakeholders involved. But we're going to do our very best, get these done as they should be before decisions are made around the recommendations moving forward. As part of the preparatory work for the consultation sessions, the school's administration will be asked to prepare a context report for consideration. And that may include courses offered and those operationalized, and there's a difference there. The difference between what we offer every year and what we actually run. It's important that we have that information inclusive of options for academic and applied streams. I know that's changing with the de-streaming initiative, but it's still in play for other grades beyond grade 9, as well as their frequency on site. How often are we running a given course? Is it every year? Is it every second year? What are we not running? All of that contextual information. Highlights of student success initiatives, opportunities for experiential learning, e-learning and v-learning that's offered on site, transition planning for feeder schools as well as to post-secondary, and any other pertinent details of challenges or opportunities that student, staff, and the school community feel is important that the administration deems highlighted for us. So there'll be a contextual report. We'll share that with everyone on site, including the staff. There may be elements that they don't work in that they're unaware of, so that we go into these meetings having that context for the conversation. Although the dates and times are to be confirmed, as well as members of senior staff and Board of Trustees, a tentative agenda is included in attachment B, so that breaks out with timing all of the breakout sessions, the welcome introductions, the consolidation, the various parts, so that you can see where you play in as a member of senior staff or the Board of Trustees to the discussion. And for each site, an electronic platform, a thought exchange will be shared with all staff in advance, so that those members who can't attend can still contribute ideas on the thought exchange, or there might be a thought that's stimulated during the discussion that they can then load up electronically that will monitor for reference, and also look at the ideas that are shared and that are voted on, opinions, concerns, queries captured through the endeavor. The feedback or input gathered from staff at each consultation will be analyzed by site, and the thoughts of the electronic platform as well. Data will also be rolled up into system-wide trends for our consideration, and the consideration, of course, of the secondary school review committee in order to shape recommendations moving forward. Once recommendations have been drafted, a subsequent meeting will also take place with other stakeholder groups, including our Federation Union partners, the senior administration, principals, vice principals, and managers, along with the Student Senate, Parent Involvement Committee, Indigenous Education Advisory Committee, and the Special Education Advisory Committee for additional perspectives. And I'll look during that day on site. I want to thank Vice Chair Kaiser for reminding me of this. I knew I'd mentioned the Student Senate here, but those representatives of the student body on site will work with each site to find some time during that day where we're listening to the student voice. We'll somehow release you from your classes, figure it out, like we're doing for your teachers and your administrators to get that student voice on site. So we'll integrate that into the thinking and then bring recommendations to the Board of Trustees for approval, ideally before the end of this calendar year, so that we're able to plan forward into the next school year, depending on what comes of it. But I'm really looking forward to going to these consultations with an open mind and an open heart to what I have to hear beyond my perspectives at this point in time, and really learn from our staff around our strengths, but also our areas for growth at the secondary level.
Questions? Susan?
Thank you. It's going to be a very interesting series of meetings, that's for sure. One of the concerns that I have is around the breakout sessions, and this could be, we can do this offline too, but I'm just thinking that 20 minutes for each session is hardly time to get your head around the conversation, to be honest. And I wondered if we need to look at it a little bit differently. Maybe have a group. I guess what I'm thinking is maybe what you do is you separate people into groups and have them work through the session, work through the topics as they can. They may not get through them all, but if they got through the top 3 that they were most interested in, that might be more valuable to get to the heart of it, as opposed to very superficial piece. I mean, it takes time to develop that rapport with your group and with the facilitator and the conversation. I think we also have to be really, really clear about what it is we're asking. Like we are going to need to have some really good, pertinent questions about what it is we want to hear from our staff, so that we really get to the heart of this, so that it doesn't look like it's a superficial consultation. So if we can just think a little bit more about that, and I can work with somebody on that kind of stuff, because I used to do this with my previous job as well.
Sounds wonderful. I think it's a valid point. You know, I was thinking as we were sort of struggling with not eliminating people's opportunity to comment on areas. But when I think of a student success team coming in, they might want to spend like 100+ minutes on student success initiatives kind of thing. So I think we can flex the way we organize it so that you don't necessarily rotate through all of them. I really appreciate the comment made. The other one is, I think beyond the context report at school, I do think, in fairness to the participants, that we'll need to set some context for staff going into this. And I think there's a front end that we bring from a governance and a management perspective. And I'll just share a couple of them, because I do think we're going to need to demonstrate leadership by guiding principles, but also management of inherent tensions. And so a couple just to share. One, and this came out in the elementary phase, we staff to our programs. We don't program to our staff. And that's extremely important that our secondary staff understand that. But having said that, and that we coordinate staff based on the programs we offer, there is a tension to be managed, which is, well, if staff are doing what they're passionate about, the best teaching happens. So we've got to balance these pieces. A second one is a commitment to programs and services offered, taking into consideration what is submitted by students through option sheets, but not based solely on option sheets. And that is also something that's a shift. If we're committing as an organization to running programs, what we can't do for the greater public good is say, well, it'll run once every 2 years, or it'll run if we have enough kids, or it'll run if there's a staff member to do it. We've got to flip that into a commitment to programs and services that's rock solid, so that we demonstrate to the public we're serious about offering things. But the tension that's managed there, and I've explained this, we talked about this yesterday at our senior staff retreat, and I'm going to be talking about it with the principals on Friday. We will be running some courses this fall that have 9 students in them, and not running this one with 16 students, because of the commitment to the program. If we always draw down the courses that only have 9 kids, some programs never get started or never survive. And that's counterintuitive to the notion of the option sheets as the driver. The option sheets isn't the driver. The programs and services that the Board of Trustees has approved from a governance level and that management is staffing is the driver. The rest fits into it. The third one on this front, which is that's especially important during a transition period when you're building a program. When the fact that 9 is 9 this year, and you've got to bite the bullet elsewhere to run the 9, but the next year it's 12, and then it's 17. If you never get past 9, it never runs. And that's hard in a transition when you have to do it. The last one is the consideration short, mid, and long term with respect to how we communicate what we're offering to the public. And too often we're in this, well, we'll run it if we have the staff. We'll run it if we have the right number of kids. There's nothing as a product or service I buy that I ever want to hear, or that I consume that I want to hear, you know, it is a new car, but it might not be running next year, right? Like, that's not confidence building. And right now, to be frank with the Board of Trustees, we're at a neutral stage. We're up 2.5% at the elementary level in our enrollment. and we're down 2.1 at secondary. And we've got to get our secondary into a confidence building mode where this is what we're running, whether there's 12 students or 17 or 24. And that's a different mindset than what the option sheets have played out. And we just go by that. So there's a lot to what you're describing, Trustee Humphreys, that again, we've got to go to listen and learn, but I also think there's enough staff that have come to me with their concerns about secondary that they won't be oblivious to putting some of these on the table and saying we have to have a serious discussion about how we're governing and how we're operationalizing our secondary programs.
So I guess I'm wondering, in order to help set that context, because there's not enough time in this to probably put all that forward. Is there some way, and maybe it's a video, Pino, of you talking about that we provide for all staff? And I know that's maybe a little bit wonky, but it clearly states those things so that they're kind of coming to this session with some of that already in their backdrop, and they are coming with a different mindset perhaps, and then we can really get some good information from them. Because I really do worry about it being too short, just getting kind of, the surface piece, and then staff not feeling that they weren't heard. And I think that's a risk that we take with having it kind of set this way and having them go through all of those sessions. Anyway, I think we can work on the process of how that day might go, but those are some things that kind of came to my mind when I first saw the agenda.
Trustee Adam?
I think I've stated at this table before that I think this is the most exciting thing that has happened in our board since I became a trustee 8 years ago. And I'm really excited by what's going on. And I want to thank our senior team and our director for taking this on in the difficult times we've been through and are still going through. And in addition to the previous one we just discussed where I got all upset. Anyway, but in particular, we do want the input of all our staff and everybody who gives some thought to these matters. But I am a total supporter of what our director has just been saying about the tension between program needs and staffing availability, and 9 students or 25 students. I was once only one student in a class in A-level French because all the others had dropped out, and that was how that school ran, and I benefited. And so I'm totally in support of the program needs dominating, not the needs of the staff, although I'm also a supporter of teachers. I mean, I'm a great respecter of teachers and of their strengths and their enthusiasms, but we have to do something with our secondary system. And I think this is absolutely crucial to what happens this coming year. And I'll be waving goodbye, but I will certainly be following this one for a long time. Thank you.
And I'm wondering, with the elementary review and the success we had with that, how long were the breakout sessions? Do you recall? Were they more than 20 minutes or were they 20 minutes?
In fairness, the comment made by Trustee Humphreys, there were fewer subject topics.
Right.
We had less to cover
Right.
in the elementary. It was a little cleaner. So we divvied up the half days in 2 or 3 sections, not 6. So I need to think about what you shared, because I think there's a lot of validity in what you're saying. And I don't want people frustrated that every time they start getting deep, we're switching.
Switching on. Yeah.
And yet there's this reality that getting a whole staff for a day is near impossible as it is. So maybe it's 2 half days and they think about it and come back, or there are ways we can. I just think you raised some really good points, and I would rather some folks go deep in some areas. And I think we might be able to sort that out based on that and have them work on it for the half day or more if we can release more staff for that time. I think you raised some good points to bring to, but it was a little cleaner now.
Hopefully we have the same success we had with this elementary review, right? That was pretty special. Yes, Trustee.
Thanks, Vice Chair Kaiser. In addition to what Susan said, I've been in breakout sessions in my career, and what happens sometimes is that those staff that are, let's just say, I'm going to be heard, 15 or 20 minutes after they get done, that sort of large medium group just sometimes doesn't get heard. And I think that's a bit of a danger there. So just wanted to make that a note. Sometimes that happens, unfortunately. And then people walk away with the opinion of, So that's the direction, and it really might not be. So just my thoughts. Thank you.
That way you have a good facilitator in a discussion like that because they
So
don't
hard to
hold that, right?
so hard in such that short period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
Thank you very much. And I'm appreciative that he added the component of the student senators. I mean, that was a great point that the student senate made about getting those students involved in school reviews, but also things like the secondary reviews. So I appreciate that for the fact that it took 4 years to get a solid suggestion from that wonderful group that we finally want to take advantage of it. I'm just kidding. But Chairperson Morris.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. I'd like to echo the comments of Trustee Adam. This is really important for our secondary. Our secondary has issues. We are losing students. That's what we see. We have to make sure that the programming is first and foremost, and it's looking at the needs of mandates from the ministry and the needs of the students in our schools. I want to thank the director and the senior team for all the work they've been obviously putting. Well, we've seen it. Putting in the past 2 years. We haven't got swept away by the waves of the pandemic. That we've kept our eye on the ball, and the work of the board has continued. And this is some of the fruit of that. And as we go into the fall with these sessions in our secondary schools, this is going to be one of the most pivotal times, I think, in the history of the board. And I'm really looking forward to what comes from this. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. The last item on the open session of the committee of the whole, no recommendations, but it's a draft letter. I'll turn it over to, I think it was in our agenda package. Turn it over to the chairperson, Mr. Morris, to speak to the item.
Thank you very much. I think this issue has been around for a while. Like how many groups of people do you know that haven't had a pay raise in 10 years, 12 years, and yet they're exceedingly important in the organization of, we're in Renfrew County, a major organization, $146 million budget, and the people at the top, well, you're really important, but we're not going to pay you, the way that we really should be. And there are a lot of issues that develop over time. First of all, in the letter, I just tried to say, yes, this has been going on for a long period of time. And here are some of the issues that have developed because of that. And we've seen these in other letters that have come from other boards. And I'm sure that the minister and staff have been getting, they have been getting letters from boards over the years, and they must have a stack, in a banker's box somewhere. Hopefully they've been read, but they haven't really been heeded. And we're getting to a situation where let's just get this over with. Let's just deal with it. And so that's my reference to the Gordian knot, where you think you can't, untie it all. And what's Alexander the Great do? Tries to untie it. That didn't work. It was a sword right through. Let's have some dramatic action. Let's just get this over with for the benefit of all the school boards in the province of Ontario, so we can get on with the business of running school systems, for the benefit of our students and our families.
Mr. Shields?
Yeah, I'm very much in agreement with this. This is very important. We need to have top people leading our organization. The other thing I wonder about is you've copied the Ontario School Board Association. Perhaps we should have included the OPSBA in that. I'm also wondering about our coterminous board. They wouldn't see this from the OPSBA, message that are sent out. So just I think this needs to be, widespread. Maybe even Premier Ford.
I'm open to that. I think that's those are good suggestions. Why not?
Could we have a little link to the medium? Maybe 1.25, something?
Well,
Sorry.
media these days is not the way it used, it used to be. We've lost a few newspapers, but
Yeah.
you know, I think we probably,
Everyone in favor of adding those people to the trustee Shields recommendation?
okay, we,
Anything
Yeah.
further?
Jakubowski and our governors board and, board. Review board. And we'll just have leaked out too.
There's no other questions. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder to move into closed session of committee of the whole. Trustee Adam, trustee Gannett, seconder. All in favor of moving into closed session? That is carried.
Here with us. We have a few new faces with us. And in public session, I'd like to welcome first of all our brand new supervisory officers. Jenny Smith, who is no stranger to this board. And also Kristin Ridell, who comes to us from far away down the road in Ottawa. And we welcome both of you and we're very, very pleased to have you here. Also a face that, well, I remember looking slightly differently when I knew him years ago, but Raymond Coleman is going to be working with our communications department that worked with Anna. And so welcome, Raymond. Really glad to have you here. Also, one more, we have with us our brand new student trustee, Ava Beggs from Madawaska Valley District High School. And I think we've got a really, you know, committed, enthusiastic, articulate pair of young ladies. We had a real succession of young ladies here, and where are the you know, the men taking over with good reason. You know. So I know you've got a really good you know, tutor and you know, in Taylor. She's been real credit to this board, and we know certainly that you will as well. So certainly welcome. And you will be officially sworn in very shortly. Don't worry, it won't hurt. I'll begin by reading the territorial acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land in which our school and district buildings are situated is the traditional, unceded, and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin people. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples on the land in which we gather here today. At this point, I'll ask our student trustee, Taylor Novosedlik, to give the invocation. Stand.
May we who are assembled here have a true understanding of the duties that are placed in our hands. We seek to have the wisdom to honor our obligations to the good of the residents of Renfrew County, to the parents, teachers, electors, and especially the students. May those who teach be ever inspired by goodness, and may the wisdom and knowledge which they impart to our students ever serve as a beacon to light in their way. As trustees and administrators, we will work together with integrity, perseverance, and respect to the fulfillment of the trust bestowed upon us.
Thank you very much. Regrets and noses. No, we have a full house. All members of the board and student trustees are here. So thank you. I require a motion to approve the agenda of today's meeting. So I need a mover and a seconder. Trustee Shields, trustee Edge. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Motion passed. Declaration of conflict of interest. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest with today's board agenda? See none. We'll move on. I need a motion to confirm the minutes of the June 14th, 2022 board meeting. So a mover and a seconder, please. Trustee Boland, trustee Gannett. All those in favor? And the motion is carried to confirm the minutes of the June 14th, 2022 meeting. Well, this is the moment. And for Ava is we have looked forward to it. I want to tell you that. So we have the declaration of office and introduction of our 2022-2024 trustee, Ava Beggs. And certainly we welcome you here. We know you're going to bring reflection of student voice to this gathering. You will represent the student body well. I'm very, very sure. So I'll ask our Director of Education, Pino Buffoni, to administer the oath of office, and then he'll witness Ava's signature on the introductory document.
If you would share
I, Ava Beggs, do solemnly declare that I am not disqualified under any act from being a student trustee of the Renfrew County District School Board. I will truly, faithfully, impartially, and to the best of my ability execute the office of student trustee, and that I have not received and will not receive any payment or reward or promise thereof for the exercise of any partiality or malversation or other undue execution of the said office, and that I will disclose any pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, as required by and in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act.
Well done, and that's the most complicated thing ever. This is just Congratulations. Great job.
On behalf of the Board of Trustees and all those present, welcome again and congratulations. And now it's official. Part of this group. Would we be able to present to Ava any of the board flag at a further time, maybe the next board meeting? Okay, so there'll be a golf shirt.
A few things for you, yeah, absolutely. Sorry, we actually should have had that for today, and it
I can
evaporated from my mind.
There you go. We didn't forget.
Okay.
Not too long. Okay, one more further comment. Student trustees on this board traditionally have punched above their weight. Not putting pressure on you. We've had an awful lot of many student trustees who have they've really served their the student body well, especially now through the student senate and the work they do there. And a number have pursued opportunities with OPSBA, the Student Trustees Association of Ontario. And we know that you bring a lot of enthusiasm and ability to this, and who knows what you're going to be able to accomplish. So again, welcome. Okay, we're going to move on to the next item, and that's committee reports to the board. And first, I'll ask Vice Chair person David Kaiser, Chairperson of the Committee of the Whole, to present the Committee of the Whole report on today's open session meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The Committee of the Whole open session report for August 23rd, 2022. The following items in open session were discussed. First of all, the introduction of our, as has already been kind of done, our new supervisory officers, Jenny Smith and Kristin Ridell. Again, repeating what's already been said, but welcome. Proposed plan for the alternative work environments, detailed administrative plan. Some people call it the hybrid model, but just alternative work environments, what we're going to look at the board moving forward in terms of being more flexible with some of our different staff in terms of where they're most able to provide the best opportunity for their work on behalf of the board. It's a pilot project that will be running for the next year. The next item was a visioning exercise. The board was briefed on the secondary school review, which will be coming up in the fall, on the site-based consultations for that secondary school review. That was something that we certainly planned to do before the pandemic hit, and something we're trying to duplicate from our elementary school review, which was very successful. And hopefully we'll have the same success in our secondary school review. I'm sure we will. The next item was the letter to the Minister of Education and Finance, just in regards to executive compensation. Our board, along with many boards in the province, are requesting the Ministry of Education remove the restrictions for our senior leaders, especially our senior leaders in administration on our board. There were no recommendations made. I move that the board receives this report.
Okay, Chairperson Kaiser has moved the receipt of the committee of the whole open session report and requires a seconder to receive this report. Trustee Gannett, thank you very much. Any discussion? Those in favor? And the motion to receive the committee of the whole open session report is carried. And now I'll ask Vice Chairperson David Kaiser, Chairperson of COW, Committee of the Whole, to present the Committee of the Whole report on today's closed session meeting.
Yes, same committee of the whole met today in closed session, August 23rd, 2022. I have 3 items on the agenda. The first one was a negotiations update. It was more just publicly what's going on in terms of the provincial-wide negotiations that are underway, or at least appear to be underway in the province of Ontario. The second item was basically a housekeeping item from our Superintendent of Business and Finance, our Petawawa easement report. That recommendation is coming. And the third item was a follow-up to the Director of Education's performance appraisal program, performance appraisal process that was started last year. We had a good review from the director on that. To note that Trustee Edge did declare a conflict of interest for the negotiations update and vacated the room. As also, according to Board Policy 24, our student trustees were also asked to vacate the room for that update. The following recommendation was made in terms of that Petawawa easement, that the Renfrew County District School Board, adopt a resolution that the board does not require for its purposes the interest that the easement would create, that is a 9-meter wide and centered on the construction site located on the water main located at Pineview Public School. I move that the board adopts this report and this recommendation.
Chairperson Kaiser moved the adoption of the committee of the whole closed session report, and I require a seconder for this. Trustee Adam, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? And the motion to adopt the committee of the whole closed session report is carried. I'll now ask Trustee Mike Gannett, a member of the CAC committee, to present the CAC committee open session report for June 15th, 2022.
Thank you, Chair Morris. Yes, the CAC committee met on Wednesday, June 15th, 2022. Several things to report. One, the Parent Involvement Committee rep from Pineview Public School gave a virtual presentation, 15-20 minutes, an overview of PIC, as well as how to support and enhance parent involvement. And just a note that they are presently looking for a new chair for the PIC committee. Second part of the report is Superintendent Poirier asked Jenny Smith and her team to present the district's annual action plan for school effectiveness and student success. This presentation was much appreciated by the committee, especially our community partners. Thirdly, staffing. I think it's important to note that there was numerous changes in special services, but most notable, we thanked our outgoing principal, Bill Smith, for his leadership and ability to bring valuable information to CAC, and always was open to clarification of information, answering any questions. I know that Brian and I really appreciated working with Bill and his insights and his knowledge. On another positive note, Brian and I are very pleased with the announcement of Angela McGregor as the new principal of special services. Brian and I both know her well, and she brings with her a lot of experience, is a very positive individual, who will lead the special services portfolio. And lastly, what we did discuss, and we're going to move forward to the year 2022-23. We are going to be starting some of our meetings, both virtual and non-virtual hybrid system. And our next meeting in September is going to be in person, but we're going to be going back and forth with that and try it for a year and see how it goes. So just like we spoke about earlier, in our own infancy, in our SEAC committee, we're going to be going that route to see how it works out. So that being said, I move that the board adopt this report.
Okay, Trustee Gannett has moved the receipt of this report, and I require a seconder to receive the report. Trustee Boland, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. The motion to receive the SEAC committee open session report is carried. At this time, I'll ask the director to give us his monthly update, which was included in the agenda package.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome back all members of the Board of Trustees, as well as senior staff, for the start of the new school year. As we prepare for the return of our students and staff across the district, there are a number of key highlights that are worthy of mention. First and foremost, on the 25th of July, the provincial government of Ontario announced a plan to catch up for the 2022-2023 school year, squarely focused on the following key components, 5 of them in total: the integration of students back into classrooms for a full school experience, continuation of tutoring programs to support gaps in learning, preparation of students for the jobs of tomorrow, provision of funds to build schools and improve educational programs and/or services, and last but not least, facilitation of mental health supports. In addition, on the advice of the Office of the Chief Medical Officer of Health, the Ministry of Education released a memorandum on the 5th of August outlining its 2022-2023 health and safety measures in schools, with most health and safety requirements remaining unchanged from the previous school year's spring season, including clarification that masks will not be required for students, staff, and visitors in schools, school board offices, or on student transportation, except in cases where staff are required to perform an aerosol generating medical procedure, an AGMP, or required to be in the same room when an AGMP is being performed, for instance, and N95 respirators fit tested are recommended and will continue to be provided. Provision of free high-quality masks for students and staff and eye protection for staff, if they choose to use them, will still be there. Promotion of appropriate hand hygiene and respiratory etiquette will also continue in schools and workplaces, and procurement of hand sanitizer for school boards throughout the province's pandemic supply chain will also be in place, as will the continuation of funding for enhanced cleaning standards and temporary additional staffing requirements, as well as ventilation and filtration improvements across all schools. Further, on the 15th of July, the ministry issued a memorandum expanding eligibility for second booster doses to Ontarians aged 18 and over in order to provide an extra layer of protection from the novel coronavirus and its variants to those who may need it. I particularly wish to acknowledge and extend a special welcome to Superintendent Smith and Ridell. It's wonderful to have you both joining our senior team. You've probably had enough of this now at this point in the day.
You're welcome.
Only today. Yeah. Who will oversee school effectiveness, school year calendar, special education, healthy schools, and positive mental health, as well as the Opeongo and Pembroke family of schools for Superintendent Smith, and for Superintendent Kristin Ridell, who will oversee student success, English as a second language, French as a second language, environmental education and sustainability, and international education, as well as the Arnprior and Renfrew families of schools. I'm also excited to welcome student trustee Eva Beggs to the district and to the table. It's superb to have you with us, lending both student voice and leadership. I know that you'll be so aptly mentored by returning student trustee Taylor Novosedlik. So looking forward to working with you both, Taylor and Ava, on student senate and here at the board table. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to extend a welcome to Raymond Coleman. Again, you're probably tired at this point of hearing.
Oh, no, we'll be coming.
Carry on, yeah. Our digital communications specialist, who will be joining Hannah McMillan in the work of our communications department, which is so important to our team. And my gratitude also to all staff, both in corporate services, our facilities and finance departments, and employee services, our human resources department, for their dedication and diligence during the summer months under the leadership of Superintendents Barnes and Poirier respectively, so that the system has ensured a smooth startup for September. Your care and commitment is so greatly valued. Thank you to all of our staff who worked tirelessly throughout the summer months to be ready for the school year. Best wishes to all student staff and school communities for a terrific start to the upcoming school year. And as a final point for members of the Board of Trustees, open invitation to all of you to join us from 8:30 to 10 a.m. this Friday for our meeting of senior administration, where all of our principals, vice principals, and senior managers will be joining us for the day. We've got that pocket of time between 8:30 and 10 where we'll have a warm breakfast for you and getting us started with our chair at 9 a.m. and then a bit of an icebreaker activity, and then I'll do my address to the group, and we'll break at about 10 o'clock on Friday. So again, for any member of the Board of Trustees who's available on Friday, it's an open invitation to come and join us. We've got lots of change over this year of individuals in positions. It's just a nice opportunity to speak to our district's leadership. The invitation is open in there for you for any and all of that 90-minute portion that you can make it for. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Director Buffoni. Okay, it now falls to me to deliver the chair's update. To join with all the members of the Board of Trustees in welcoming back all staff for another year of doing what we all want to do, working with and for the benefit of all our students. We've been through almost 2.5 years of a very serious pandemic, which has affected our students and their families in ways we are very familiar with, as well as lingering effects we are just beginning to appreciate and grapple with. It has been a tough time, but we have risen to the challenge. Thanks to everyone in the organization for all their extraordinary efforts in ensuring that the educational journey of our students continues, whether it be in person or virtually. We are so very proud of you all. Thanks also to our students, parents, and community at large for doing what needed to be done. Your resilience and determination was remarkable. We are starting a new school year. This will not be a normal time, rather it will be a new normal in which we exercise caution. The virus and its variants are still with us, but also in which we proceed with enthusiasm, working with our students as they learn and strive to find their place in the world. I can tell you that the work of the board has continued over the past couple of years in spite of the pandemic. Exciting days are ahead for all of us as we journey forward together. This time I'll ask the student trustees for their update.
Despite being in summer mode, Ava and I have already started making action plans for our upcoming year together. Some goals we've set aside include setting different committees within our Senate, becoming more involved with individual schools by possibly setting up some in-person or virtual meetings with each student council, along with wanting to do more personal reaching out when it eventually comes time to present leadership presentations for student trustee elections. We discussed how we would like to become more active on our social media. One plan to do this was by possibly starting a monthly student spotlight posts. And lastly, a bigger goal of ours was trying to make our schools more eco-friendly. We would like to plan how we would like to do this closer to the school year and with our Senate. Already, we have lots of plans for the school year and it hasn't even begun. I look forward to working with Ava, and on behalf of both of us, we're tremendously excited to see what this year has in store. This past school year, we coordinated with our school councils that going into the 2022-23 school year, we would like to have Senate in place so we could immediately start working together as a team. So before the school year ended, a form was made by Ava and I that was sent to each senator so that we could see what the group overall wanted to accomplish this year. Despite not getting much feedback, we'll be sending it out again when the school year begins to hopefully collect more responses. And for Asta Eco on August 1st, officially, I was officially the start of my term as the media designer coordinator, and Ava's start as a Southern Regional Rep for the Public Board. We've spent August preparing for our roles and having meetings with our individual teams to plan the year out. And that is everything.
Thank you very much. And now an OPSBA update. The trustees Adam, Humphreys, and Fields have anything to?
I just have a couple of quick things. just to let you know, the OPSBA Executive Planning meeting is next Monday, so I'll be traveling to Toronto for that meeting. Our next board meeting is the end of September, and we have received announcements of 2 retirements from the OPSBA team. Our Executive Director, Rusty Hick, is leaving, retiring really the end of the year, and Penny Muston, who has been our Director of Labor Relations, is also going to be leaving. I think she's staying there as long as she can, but we also recognize that she's been a tremendous leader in the negotiation piece. So I'm not sure how that's all going to evolve, but we just got notice of that this week. So that's all I had. Marcia or Dave, did you either have anything? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to correspondence. You have in your package the Future of Education Leadership by Signposts, and it has been, I will say, included in your package. And I'll ask our director to speak to it.
Sure. While we're speaking today, just a quick point through you, Mr. Chair of the Board of Trustees. This is an article that senior staff spent some time talking about in our year-end wrap-up retreat, and then again in our year beginning or year startup meeting yesterday. An article that's really struck a chord for us as senior leaders in public education on Signposts for the Future. We thought it was a really interesting article that wasn't too lengthy to digest, and we'll be sharing this with our principals, vice principals, and senior managers on Friday to have a discussion around elements of this article as we move forward as an organization and as leaders within it. And just thought it was something worthwhile to share with the Board of Trustees for your own interest and perusal. A really interesting article written in August of last year that I think does set the stage for our work coming out of the pandemic.
Trustee Humphries.
Just make a quick comment. If you haven't had a chance to read it, I really would encourage you to. I kind of read it through yesterday and then I read it more thoroughly this morning, but there's lots of little tidbits there that I think really would resonate with us. The age of disruption was certainly one term that I really appreciated, and talking about learning ecosystems, and there's just a lot of things for food for thought. And it also reminded me about some of the excellent articles that are on the OECD website. And there's some really good short little 2-3 minute videos about sort of education in the future that OECD has put together. They're really, really good. And again, just good food for thought. So I would encourage you to read them if you haven't had a chance.
Thank you. Any other comments? I really appreciate Director Buffoni, when you do, put these articles in here, and sometimes you provide each of the trustees with a book you found very useful. And I try to get my way through the books, and I've been actually pretty successful. And they do, they flesh out really our perspective on what's happening in education. So thank you for that. I have to confess I haven't read the whole thing yet, but I have been reading, in it, and it's written extremely well. It's easy to read, and there's a lot there that just really captured my imagination, and I appreciate that. So thank you again. Okay, any other business?
I'm sorry, Chair, I should have thought of this in advance and been on the agenda, but I'm not.
Sure.
But it's something that Leo and I were both involved in during the summer, which was our Indigenous students, I forget what they called it, was an activity week or something like that, done in cooperation with our coterminous board and with the grant from the ministry. And this involved one out at Rankin Community Centre there, and they were busing in every day students from all over our county. Not only Algonquin students, because there were Inuk students there, and there were Cree and various other people, and they had managed to corral a number of our permanent staff in other schools who had agreed to come for this week and teach their special skill, from making paddles to beading to working with beautiful deer skin and all those things. And they all came, and there were I'm sorry, I should have prepared this and I haven't. I've just thought of it now. I forget how many students there were. Leo, do you remember, or did you take a note of how many students attended?
I think like 40.
It was about that. I was going to say 35 to 40, right? And they were engaged in half a dozen different traditional crafts, in addition to doing, walking circles and various other things and learning some dances and so on. I didn't see any of that. And they got their lunch and snacks, and I had a discussion with some of the staff about, those things and how they decided to go for quality food and all that, even though it was more expensive. And of course, our people facilitating this were our lead, Tina Nelson, and the two grad coaches, Judy Ellis and
Logan Wright.
Right. Sorry,
Logan Wright.
Logan Wright. And they were also engaged in all this, and they had the use of the whole community center there, and were doing different things in different rooms, and had the big space for the kind of activities. And then there was work going on outside on carving things and all that. And I spent several hours there one morning, I think. And Leo went the next afternoon, I believe. We were invited to go as the members of the advisory committee. And it was wonderful. And I spoke with several of the students, and who explained to me what they were doing and the significance of this. And in the one room, they were making the faceless dolls. And so I was speaking with the students, and then I said, "And what about yours? Tell me about that." She said, "Well, this isn't really in my culture, but I'm finding it sort of interesting." And it turned out that she was an Inuk student. And so, it was totally foreign to her, as it was to me. But she was falling in, and they were, it was just such a lovely atmosphere there. Leo, can you add?
Yeah, it was, I've just gone through like some of my pictures out there, you can see them, but so there was a game, Inuit games, right? So where the idea is there's a couple of ways you can do it. So you're just sitting on the ground, back to each other, and then try and make your way up. And then there's another way, the same thing, sitting on the ground, but it was Judy Ellis and I think Logan. And then the idea was to push the other person. So it's like a tug of war, but just with your body and trying to push the other person off. So it was interesting to see, that aspect and getting the kids out. They had sometimes up north, they have the games where you kick a ball, right? Or just a small ball. So you have to jump and kick. And so he was showing some of the students. And they have some agility to do that, right? And some other stuff that they were doing. Like if I was going to do it, I had to have a physio and chiropractor on call right away. But it was interesting to see them engaged, and it was like, it was like time to move on to something else. And I go, no, let's try and continue on with this. And same with Marjorie, I had a nice meal. I looked at the days, and one day was caribou stew.
I didn't go that day.
I went on that day, and it was awesome. So the person made a caribou stew, enough for everybody to sample, but they also then had, a regular, like I think it was subs that they could also make. So, but there was nothing that was very very good, very tasty. So I think it was good for the students that got to see other people like them, from both, across our board, but also with the other board, so it was nice for them to meet other people and make friends, and just know that, you're not alone. There's lots of other people there that you can relate to, and with the adults, that could help support, and then the organization that helped lead this and bring up speakers and stuff like that, also, a good resource and a good information for all the kids. So I think, it was, wonderful.
Thank you to Mr. Chair. Thanks, Trustee Adam and Trustee Boland, for your comments. And I just want to provide a quick comment and an opportunity. I wanted to thank Superintendent Kuzno for his leadership in championing, supporting, and overseeing these programs. And maybe I don't want to put you on the spot, but any comment on its context for the program, your perspective to Superintendent Kuzno?
I was invited but unable to attend that week because I was confined to staying at the condo. No, they like many other initiatives, the Indigenous teams, both our district and the coterminous district, work hand in hand It is a partnership that works well because our students are from the same communities. And we've seen a success with the speakers series last year. We've seen success with the summer learning program. So certainly these are opportunities that we will continue to pursue in support of those students.
If I could add one other thing is that there was a kind of emphasis on personal wellness, which is a word I dislike, but it describes what we're talking about here. There were not any official legal kind of counselors, but I think there was a good deal of personal counseling going on there for students who have difficulties in their lives. I myself spoke with a young lad who was sitting all by himself, having a snack on a table just before I was leaving. And he said he was only able to come for a couple of hours several times a week during the week because he had this job at one of the fast food places and he had to get there and they needed extra hours and he needed the money for his family. And so, but nonetheless, being very tired from his overtime job, he was there and he said, but it was still so great to come in here. So he was really, not only appreciative, but appreciative to the extent that tired from his perhaps thankless tasks, that he would stop by before going home. And he was sitting by himself, which was the reason I went to talk to him. But so he hadn't had time to make many contacts there, but he was still finding it fulfilling in one dimension, which I do not know about. But I thought this was a very interesting sideline. And there must have been lots of others there who for whom that kind of insight would have been relevant. Sorry. Thank you. I wouldn't say any more.
Any other comments or questions of Leo or Marjorie? Thank you very much, Marjorie and Leo, for representing the board at this celebration of Indigenous culture and celebrating our partnership with them. Very important that you were there. Thank you. Any other business? Okay, and I now need a motion to adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much, Leo. Second by Dave. All those in favor? The meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.